Hey, welcome back to the first actual episode of the devlog I wanted to make. Realized that I should probably tell you what the game is first, so um, I just recorded a video about me explaining what the demo is. But now I think the more interestingly is like where I'm taking it and what's going on. So let me show you how I implemented stuff in the demo, and you'll get a look into like how my very terribly structured game jam code often looks. These are all the paths that the squirrel can take. So people are like, is it like generated or is it always the same? And it's not generated. It also isn't always the same. I made 7 handmade paths. Here's one of them. So the circle is where the fence is placed. You can see the trees. It's incredibly annoying to look at in scene mode. But the circle is just like a debug gizmo for where the fence is, so I know kind of where to put the path, and just grabs these waypoints and puts thick gizmo line in the middle, or between the waypoints. So let's look at another one. See, oh yeah, and I lerp the color in my gizmo code. I lerp it from red to green, so I know where to start and to end is, because sometimes the paths cross and it gets a little confusing. So if the game starts, it just picks a random one of these and just keeps looping that until you finish, as you know, the scope of the game jam game. And in this case, yeah, the orange tree would be here. It would start zigzagging, and end up on the complete other side of the map. We can see, if I do this, I can show this in action. Oh, I think I just maybe forced it. It'll probably pick C now because it's the only one it can find. Yeah. And so if we go and sit down, it's nighttime now. Yeah, we'll probably see the squirrel run around. Yeah, you can actually see it run on the map. Maybe it's too small. It's actually running along the path, and it just does that over and over and over again. And it's quite. Oh yeah, the thing at the bottom is the outline shader doesn't properly resize if I resize the window. I put a hotkey. If I press R, it resets. But yeah, so the paths were, handmade and very, very roughly made. There wasn't a whole lot of wiggle room or a whole lot of flexibility. So one of the first things I decided to do in my first week working on the game is to really dig into how can I make sort of a level design tool for myself for the squirrel. If I want to, for example, I want the map to be more interesting. So one of the first things I did was found a bunch of rocks, and this is very, very broken. So don't judge me too harshly. But there's a forest in France called Fontainebleau that Unity themselves, like Unity the company, did some photogrammetry tests on, and it's a forest I used to climb in. So I have like some, I really like this forest, and I thought it'd be cool to just like try to get it into Unity, see how it looks. I think it looks immediately like really interesting. It's very promising. It's definitely nowhere near how I would want it to look, but it immediately proposes like the problem that like my waypoint system would not work with this at all. It just kind of, between point A and B, it would like raycast down along the line onto the terrain, and in this case, it would just, for example, like jump vertically from here to here in one frame. It would look awful. The smoothness of the terrain is kind of required to work with my game jam code. So I decided to just really completely overhaul it, create a completely new system based on the Unity Navmesh, which, if you're not familiar, the Navmesh kind of figures out the Navmesh is this blue thing. It's literally a mesh, so a bunch of points and triangles that are calculated off of the horizontal surfaces that it can find. Really weird, Unity has a legacy Navmesh implementation, which took me a long time to figure out what the difference is. The only way I found you actually can get Unity to tell you it's legacy is because it's called legacy bake settings. So ignore most of this, but actually go on GitHub and get the Navmesh components. Very kind of frustrating to have to figure all this out. Reverse engineer or whatever which state this system currently is in Unity, but okay, I figured it out. So you have to add a Navmesh surface somewhere, and you can give it like which layers it should look at, and then bake it. You can also just completely clear it I'm going to clear these links. I'll explain what they are in a second. And rebake it. It's actually super fast, and the system even works at runtime, which I will probably never need, but it's good to know that it's like a cool, usable system. And yeah, based off of this angle, like 60 degrees, which I can tweak, any surface that is angled at 60 degrees or less is walkable. And the character itself has some radius, so it creates this like gap, so to make sure that your character isn't going to stand too close to the wall either, which is all super useful. A thing that the Navmesh implementation doesn't have is jumping links. They used to be called Offmesh links. They're now called Navmesh links. And there used to be a way to, like here actually in the, where is it? If you bake the legacy one, it actually creates these jumping points, which was super cool. Like you could, automatically detect that your squirrel can jump from. I'm asymmetric. Oh, come on. You could automatically detect that the squirrel can jump from this ledge to here, and that's super desirable. Like it would be really great if a squirrel could figure out where to jump. But it proved. Well, yeah, because of this legacy implementation, I couldn't use it anymore. And it looks like there is no new solution for it yet. I found a script on the forums, however, which is very helpful. I'll try to remember to link it. That does it for horizontal jumps. So, I got this working really quickly. But I wanted it to be for kind of everything, for vertical as well. Like I made this level specifically because I want, for example, the squirrel to jump from here to there, and to also jump between these bridges. Because then what you get when you run the pathfinding, so the Navmesh has a built-in pathfinding system, which is pretty solid as well. If you run the pathfinding, the squirrel will start finding routes between points that me as a lazy level designer would probably never think of, which is exactly what I wanted. Like, I'm not sure that I'm ever going to have procedural levels, but it's nice for me to sort of procedurally generate them, play them, and then figure out, like, yes, this is what, this current mission where I want to tell this part of the story, it makes sense that the squirrel follows this route or whatever. I want to basically, create a level editor for the game that uses the Navmesh. So I ended up extending the thing I found on the forums, and let me see. Yeah. So it generates these links, which the squirrel now can use, or like they're connected to the Navmesh. They're basically findable by the pathfinding system, and they get added to it. So let's just see it in action. Sorry for teasing you or waiting this long. We're probably like 10 minutes into the video and I haven't actually shown anything working. But yeah, if I go from here to there, I made this little scrubber. So another thing that I need is to make it fully rewindable. That's a different problem. So it finds, in this case, this link between here and here, which I would have probably never thought of, to reach its goal, and it uses that. The pathfinding is pretty good. Like, it can also, for example, figure this out. Yeah, there it goes. Set it to auto run. There it goes. Oh, backwards. This is super fun. I've definitely spent at least as much time just staring at it as I have spent building it. Creating these off-mesh links felt really daunting at first. It's like, oh my god, there's got to be so much like complex mesh calculations. But actually, it consists of two parts that are actually relatively easy to understand. If you can identify of your Navmesh, first of all, you can get the points of your Navmesh. You can identify what the edges are. Like, this is an edge, but for example, this line is not an edge. You make a list of those edges, and then from those edges, you can get an edge normal. So like that would be this line. You want to get this line out of this edge, for example. And along that line, you just do a bunch of like downward raycasts to figure out where, if it hits anything on the Navmesh at any point on the way down. If it does, you can probably jump there. And I mean, you can set your jumping distance. Your jumping distance would determine how many raycasts you do. So if I, for example, here do probably should stop playing. If I decrease my max jump length to 5, this jump will probably disappear. Yeah, so it can't jump there anymore now because the squirrel can only jump 5. But I actually wanted to jump 10, so generate that back. And here you can actually see exactly how the raycast kind of works. It starts here, it raycasts down once here, and it finds this edge, and that's great. It probably raycasts a second time, but I've told it to ignore if it reaches the same height it already has before, so that like it doesn't keep making jumps everywhere. But then here, because of the height difference on the slope, it finds all these 3 points. So these like vertical, like raycast, 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 get ignored if they're the same height, but are allowed when they're different heights. It's just why you have three different jumping points here. And I mean, the only reason I optimize it is because a couple hundred links is fine, but if you don't trim them, it'll be a couple thousand links easily. It also creates bullshit links still, which is quite frustrating, and it's like every time you meet one, like I hadn't actually spotted this one before making this video. It's probably, yeah, it's this guy. So the squirrel could jump from this edge to here, which means it'll definitely intersect with this geometry. But the interesting thing is the script creates actual individual game objects. So this Navmesh link lives on a game object that I can just disable or even delete. So that's a manual step that I hope to one day get rid of, but at least, you know, for every bit of terrain at some point during the process of the development of the game, the terrain will be final. There's this like singular manual step of like removing these bullshit links before we can finalize that. So yeah, that was a couple days of work to get all that to work, but I'm super happy with it. And if anybody's trying to solve the same problem, I already shared my link generator on Twitter. I really don't mind sharing it with you, and if you make it better, if you want to share it back. But that's just the Navmesh stuff. There's a bunch of other stuff I want to talk about, so I'm gonna try to speed it up so that this video doesn't end up being hours and hours long. But yeah, the interesting thing, this has all been like tech so far, but it's really interesting. Like I'm pretty close, I feel. I kind of want to leave the door open to maybe making procedural levels in this game. If people like hunting for squirrels and they've played the story, which realistically will probably only be 2 or 3 hours long, it would be a shame if they can't, you know, experience it more or like to, you know, play it for longer. If it's just like it's a fun activity, you should be able to maybe play some more missions, maybe like a daily squirrel or something. They're all ideas that I definitely want to explore, and I don't want to shut the door on them too early. So especially when this Navmesh, like the past generation part of the Navmesh, could easily run at runtime. Why not? Why not consider it? And yeah, I want to stop talking about the Navmesh now, but I want to just make a fun little path and then show the squirrel running on it. Oh, it's running backwards. I created some hotkeys to change the speed, and if I press shift, he starts running backwards. I also added an FPS mode for myself to go. Oh, I don't know actually where he is. Where'd you go? Oh. Oh, he's in the tree already. Okay, that's running ahead, little man. I was going to talk about the trees next. Yeah. Yes. I think I'm probably going to leave it there for this video and talk about all the other stuff I did in another video. Cool. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and follow me on Twitter. Right? It's a thing people say in videos. Bye.